you going, and this will, if I didn't already tell you, this will be up on YouTube later so people can watch it there as well.
Cool.
All right, cool. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well. We're about to have an exclusive conversation and interview with the one and only producer and DJ extraordinaire, Lil Texas. Brand new record, Faster, is out now. It is a hardcore triumph, in my opinion. And I was hoping to have Lil Texas on today to have a general discussion, at least a little bit, about hardcore electronic music, hardcore EDM, hardcore techno in general, considering the fact that in so many ways, I see this record and I see a lot of the big singles he's been dropping over the past couple of years as, in a way, kind of bringing a little bit of a resurgence of the style. I mean, Lil Texas is seeing a lot of success, a lot of collaborations, getting some great festival placements as well. And yeah, I mean, I just have to pick the guy's brain because honestly, this is not a genre of music that frankly I've needed to think all that much about since really since the 90s, since I was a kid and maybe I'd like catch a whiff of something from like the Prodigy on the radio or MTV, or I'd like catch a happy hardcore compilation at like the fucking CD store Strawberries like back in the day or some shit like that, but the thing is like, this is a style of music that's always been way more predominant in Europe than it's been in the US. And, now with artists like you, we are seeing a little bit more play with it stateside. And it's really cool to hear some artists and some records like not only getting a little bit more aggressive with it, but also kind of paying tribute to the roots of the genre too, especially since it's like spawned off into so many different subgenres over the years. So I guess like to kind of get this started, what was your first introduction to hardcore in general? What kind of like, brought you down that rabbit hole that, I guess kind of made it an obsession with you, at least as a fan?
Good question. I've always been an electronic music fan since I was a young kid, so it was hearing Mr. Wazo, like, when I was just like, third, fourth grade, like really young.
Okay.
And then Fat of the Land, The Prodigy, we were talking about that a little bit. Square Pusher, then
Hell yeah.
who like, I was a bass player for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're speaking
bass.
my love language.
I went to college for bass actually. So we'll talk some bass. Yeah. So I was into Square Pusher, Aphex Twin, all that stuff, Mr. Wazo, and getting exposed to electronic music in general, Prefuse 73, kind of that Warp Records era, sort of. And then after that, I just started kind of diving into the different subgenres, and this is like in the 2000s, I think. And, I ended up coming across Gabber House, and at the time, like I wasn't like super, super invested in the Gabber House movement of the 90s or late 90s and that, but it was something that was always on my radar. And I was like, I knew this crazy, super fast music existed. I knew like the Thunderdome raves were happening in Holland during the 90s. And it was probably like the largest cultural movement ever to come out of Holland. And so anyways, from there, it kind of led to like Anger Fist, getting into Anger Fist in the like late 2000s and Tommy Knocker, Noise Suppressor, and that sort of millennium sound was where I sort of entered actually. Just kind of like a lot of people do. You hear Anger Fist sort of, and you get into that sort of millennium early to middle Anger Fist sound. And then through there, I just started like kind of diving deeper into hardcore around 2016, but just listening to it. Not really doing much with it and spinning some tracks in my DJ sets. But over the years, from like 2016 to 2018, more and more hardstyle and more hardcore were appearing in my DJ sets. And I just started leaning that way. And I decided to take a break from music. What I was doing before, I made like Jersey Club and trap music and stuff like that, EDM trap. Just wasn't working out for me. So I put music on the side. I said, you know what? It's all good. Like I tried, I did some cool stuff. Like it's all good. Put it to the side.
In some of those DJ sets you were referring to, were the transitions hard, considering like the BPM increase, like to to any given hardcore song?
Yeah, it was probably like the last 10 minutes was like the only like bit I played.
Got it. You'd have to bunch it together.
Yeah, but anyways, what was crazy is I put it down and somehow like these Insomniac got a video of me playing hardcore. Somebody bailed on a festival in 2018 and I got lucky and got booked. And it went really, really well. I played an all hardcore set because I just didn't care, Anthony. I was like, my music career is over. Who cares? I'm going to go play this festival and literally play an entire hardcore set. Like, I do not care.
Well, again, like considering at this point, like the genre culturally at the place and time that you're doing this is not super prevalent. Like, how are the crowds reacting to this stuff? Because again, this is like not something we were seeing thousands of records of released a year since the 90s, you know?
Well,
So
at this particular festival, it was a hardstyle festival.
oh, okay,
There's
okay, got
one
it,
big hardstyle festival every year in SoCal called Wasteland.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so anyways, there's stages at EDC and stuff too. But anyways, so they received it very well. But they didn't expect me to play an entire hardcore set. They didn't know what to expect because I wasn't truly a hardcore DJ then. So it went well. And I just like took it as a sign that I was like, well, I guess this is like what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm not supposed to be like a sales guy at a sales job. And I was like, well, shit, man, let me put out a song at 200 BPM, whatever. And like 3 weeks later, Porter Robinson was playing it and Skrillex and Boys Noise were dropping that song. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so from then it's just been like an onslaught. Every 3-4 weeks we're putting out music, and fully invested my life into this sound because it sort of revitalized my music career and sort of kind of saved me in a way, saved my creative health, I guess, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you've been on a bit of a personal progression as well in terms of like cleaning yourself up and like exercising and so on and so forth. Does this like coincide pretty like succinctly with kind of your, you know, traversing into this genre?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like there's all the gym bros are out listening to hardstyle and like, you know, hardcore. There's like a whole subset of TikTok of like dudes like flexing and doing stuff, like listening to hardstyle. It's like it's a thing, like little Reuter teens. They're like 23 or 18 on a bunch of steroids, like posing to hardstyle. It's like a community of TikTok kids. So yeah, that I was listening to it in the gym and just like that sheer energy and force and just everything about it, you know, I don't know. It just all kind of like fit into itself. And it was a sort of outlet, I guess, for my like kind of craziness, you know, from my previous life running around being not very healthy.
Yeah. No, you're getting your high out of like, you know, the incredibly aggressive and like searing kicks and everything like that.
Exactly.
Okay. So, you know, go into that a little bit. Like, what about the genre outside of that and like the speed of it kind of just like draws you to it as a fan? Like, what do you feel like it has that no other sort of genre or subgenre in electronic music has that kind of makes you dedicate yourself so much to it?
It reminds me, Anthony, of like crust punk and grind. Like that's the same feeling because I'm a huge Pig Destroyer, Agoraphobic Nosebleed, Nasm, Napalm Death. Like I am a mass disrupt into like the crusty side of it. Even the like street punk exploited kind of early records and stuff like that. Like I really, really resonate with that fast sound. Always have. I've never really been a sludge metal kind of guy. And hardcore reminded me of that feeling, that grind feeling, the blast beat.
Right.
And I was over the music I was making and I wanted to do something more aggressive and more like punk rock, I should say, you know, something like that. And I found like the up-tempo hardcore stuff at 200 and up. And I was like, this is like the most punk electronic EDM music I've ever heard. Like, let's see if we can kind of like deliver this in a way that might like reach the American EDM fan base, you know, because I want to play big festivals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely something that like you work into your aesthetic, almost like this, you know, unspoken bridge between hardcore and like a bit more of like a punk or a metal sort of like style or vibe. I mean, you know, obviously the cover of your new record is like a huge Rob Zombie reference, you know what I mean? So, you know, to your knowledge, are there many other artists in the scene who are making that same connection? Or are you like, you know, kind of the, you know, the person making that, or the person making the illusion the most obviously, to your knowledge?
I think there's a lot of, well, within EDM, actually, there's a lot of like former sort of scene metalcore kids.
Right. I mean, Skrillex is one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect example. There's like a million of those type of people. I think especially in dubstep and stuff, they kind of came from that era. A lot of the producers, I did not as much. I came from more of the street punk grind, you know, metal side of things. White Zombie 2 and like Pantera and things like that resonated with me more than the metalcore scene and all that stuff. Although I do like it. But there is definitely a lot of like hardcore artists in Europe that are total metalheads. They also like, I've noticed a lot of like the sort of trap metal, like Zillikami kind of stuff, being a sound that they're interested in making a hybrid style in Europe with hardstyle and hardcore. But if you do look at old Agoraphobic Nosebleed records, there's one record with a B-side with a ton of like terrorcore, hardcore, and breakcore remixes on the B-side. And it's from like 2006, I want to say. So there is like a direct link there between like the heyday of grindcore, I would say, and actual hardcore, and terrorcore as well.
And, right now, like, would you say the genre in terms of the amount of records or songs we hear coming out, the artists who are kind of like, inhabiting the space stylistically, are we seeing growth at this point? Because, for quite a while, I wouldn't say the genre was totally dead, but it was like definitely lying dormant in comparison to where it was in the 90s.
I think that hardcore is extremely trendy. When I go to like underground parties in New York and LA and these like after hours joints, all the DJs are spinning like 155 and up, like 160 hard techno that's like leaning into Gabber house. There was all these videos of Nina Kravitz too, dropping like Gabber stuff. And I think it's just kind of overall become like a sort of trendy sort of sound, especially like the stuff that sort of pulls from that 90s rave aesthetic.
Right.
There's something like fashion about it right now. And I've seen the waves in the underground. It was Deconstructed Club in the 2013, 14, 15. Then it slid into something else. And now I'm seeing this hard techno and hardcore sort of revival. And it's definitely Gabber house leaning. It's definitely old school leaning. Like some of the stuff I do is a little too mainstream for that underground sound. However, it's something that I am influenced by and that I do like resonate with. So yeah, hardcore in general is popular. Do I see it popping in the mainstream as much? Not really. There's some happy hardcore stuff happening within like the hyperpop left field pop realm, but tried and true hardcore, maybe some of the stuff I've done has reached some plateaus that were maybe not feasible a couple years ago. With the Lady Gaga thing and stuff. Yeah.
Well, with the headway that you've been able to make so far and your knowledge of the genre up until this point, like what do you feel like you're personally doing artistically and with this record specifically that kind of defines you as a hardcore artist? Because, what do you feel like you're doing that's celebrating the past, but also trying to separate yourself from it at the same time?
Good question. I just sit down and I write music. There's never really an intention. Very rarely do I sit down and have like, okay, 180 BPM, it's going to be this thing. It just sort of flows. And what my ear gravitated towards were those rave sounds, those 90s rave aesthetics. And a lot of the mainstream hardcore that I'm hearing come out in Europe on like Masters of Hardcore and these other labels has a very anthemic sort of going to war, kind of like really big room sort of sound with like, these kind of sound vocals that sound sort of like they're from 300, like the movie 300, like this is Sparta. And then it's, it's some hardcore song. And that kind of stuff never really resonated with me. The more sort of wacky, just wacky sort of fun sound to hardcore that I try to bring. I try to make it like fun and less about this like fictitious war in the future that we're fighting and our weapon is hardcore music or something, I've just never resonated with that heavily. So what came to my mind was blending this kind of old school sound that like everybody can kind of relate to because of like the 90s and the 2000s and happy hardcore and all these different things, while giving it that 2018 to 2022 now jacket, putting that jacket on and having the production quality be at a level where I can play these songs for thousands of people and they're going to hit after the DJ that plays before me, And so that's kind of just been my like whole mindset, is to just do what I want to do in my own way. And it's out of a naivety, man. It's out of an ignorance, because I didn't know how to make a real hardcore kick. I didn't really know how to make hardcore. So I had tools on my computer and I had samples and sounds and programs and plugins. And so I got the sounds to sound as close to hardcore as I could get them. And it worked for me. It was like, well, but I like this. This sounds cool and it's different and it's fresh. And out of that, and it catching with those first couple releases, it taught me a really valuable music lesson, which was just trust yourself. And like, because I sent one of the songs, Anthony, I sent one of my first songs to Anger Fist. And he told me he didn't like it. And I put it out anyways. And that same song, Porter Robinson was playing 3 weeks later. Same with Skrillex played it. And dude, it taught me the most valuable lesson I've ever learned within music, which was just like, trust yourself, man. Because if I would have listened to Anger Fist, who's the biggest hardcore DJ in the world,
right,
I wouldn't have put that song out and we wouldn't be talking today.
Right.
I hope that answers that question.
No, I think it does. You know, to kind of dig down into something interesting that you referenced earlier in terms of like the almost warlike tone of, you know, some of these other songs that that you were in productions that you were talking about. You know, do you sort of see your music as aggressive as it is, as almost having like a cheeky sort of undertone to it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But that's my personality, man.
Right.
Taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that definitely comes out in your social media as well. I mean, you obviously don't take yourself too seriously.
No. How can I? I mean, I'm playing, you know, this obscene music on stage. I'm playing remixes of the Frozen theme song at 200 BPM. You know what I mean? Like, you can't take yourself too seriously.
Right.
And it's more about just like having fun. That's really like, it's like, let's have fun. This is like kind of weird that like I'm going, like some of this music sounds like I'm going to battle. Like when did raving become about going to a war in the future with hardstyle as your weapon? It just seems a little strange to me.
No, I mean, you know, you cite what you do and you point out what you do about those attitudes, but you do embody it in your own way with like, you know, some of those almost like trumpet like synth leads, and then all of a sudden
yeah.
And you know, the way you've kind of slathered some of the elements that you're working with reverb, it sounds like you're literally at the rave. You know, it doesn't sound like super dry, and then you would play that on a loudspeaker and kind of get the fuller experience in sort of a large area. It sounds like you're there just listening to the record itself.
Yeah.
And you know, was that also an intention when you were kind of producing a lot of these tracks? Did you want to give it the sense of place? Did you want it to feel like you were somewhere as opposed to like, yeah, this is just like a hardcore track that somebody else could DJ somewhere?
Yeah, I've never really had that intention in mind to produce songs that I think other DJs are going to play. Like if they do, great. That's awesome. What I want to produce is the music that like is the accompaniment to like the Lil Texas show. Like when you come out to see me, you know, like the pants are off, the shirt's off, I'm on the decks, I'm screaming into the mic that I feel like the Joker, and like the music's extremely fast, you know? And like I was played in San Francisco 2 weeks ago and the whole crowd got on stage with me. And it was just this like epic moment. And I want my music that I create to have that energy, that it feels like you're at a Lil Texas show. And it's just like Joker mode, you know?
So to, you know, almost like tie a bit of a bow on the hardcore conversation generally and just give people maybe some more recommendations and ideas in terms of like what to listen to. Like where do you feel like the genre is now currently in terms of like how many people are active within it? And in your opinion, like what are some other, you know, DJs and producers right now in a similar lane that you feel like are worth listening to?
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, if I want to start with the Americans, you know, I'm really excited about a couple people. Water Spirit is one that I'm very excited about.
Who's also on your new record?
Is also on my new record. They are making incredible stuff. I also think this guy Dead X, who's new, he's a friend of mine. He's new and he's making some really, really good raw style. And I think he has he's got similar taste to me. And I think he's pitching and delivering raw style in a very interesting way. He's like brand new though. So I'm excited to see what happens with him in the future. And, you know, there's a ton of people in the underground who I think, and underground or not underground, that are doing some really cool stuff. Like Basek has continually been doing amazing stuff in LA. Gartex is another producer. She dates Basek. They're both making like really quality music. I think she's a cool album coming out soon. And then in Europe, you know, like I think the up-tempo scene and the raw style scene, as opposed to sort of the mainstream hardcore stuff, there's some great mainstream hardcore coming out. But I think like the up-tempo stuff, that's getting released is just like really cool and just like so dirty and just like it's like I relate it to like, you know, like the SoundCloud rap movement where it was like just this sort of like, I don't want to say like degradation of the music, but like this like sort of like stripped back simplistic, like just like edgy, gritty, less polished, but there was something so good there that resonated with so many people, blown out drums and all that. I think that the up-tempo scene in Europe has that element. I'm really excited about Dither. I think this guy Dither, he's from Holland. He's making just probably the best quality hardcore, I think, in the game right now. Then, you know, if people are out there and they want to look at who I'm listening to, if you just go to my SoundCloud and look at my DJ mixes that I release every season, I put the track list up there. Those are all my favorite artists. So if you're curious, go check out those artists, dive deep, dive into Spotify. Everything's there.
Anybody watching on Twitch and on YouTube can see I put your SoundCloud link. It's on the page as well. So you guys are invited to go there. So let's move on to, you know, the new album over here. I mean, you talk about like how much you're working on tracks, how prolific you are. And I've certainly seen that because, I mean, you know that I've been, especially during the New Music Friday streams, I mean, we've been reacting to your tracks and your singles for a while. And, you know, whenever we play them, chat's always going absolutely fucking insane, like every time, regardless, like no matter what. So, you know, when it came time to put this record together, you know, I was surprised to see, you know, and obviously it's not to the detriment of the record. It's more of a tribute in terms of like how much you're making and how much you're producing. I was surprised to see so little of all those tracks that we've been hearing over the past couple of years not land on this record. But again, I say that that's a tribute to how much you're making all the time. So it's like, you know, when you did start putting this record together in terms of like the time frame or like what tracks would or wouldn't make it onto it, was there a cutoff? Was there a point in time where you're like, these tracks are for the record, these tracks are not? Or did this end up just kind of being like a culmination of a certain period of time where these songs assembled or created with kind of an overall vision or sound in mind? Or was it, you know, or is it more just like a compilation of what you're kind of creatively tinkering with within a certain time frame?
A little bit of all of what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
The idea for the record, the like sort of structure that I built off of was that like my DJ sets start from 160 and I play like raw hardstyle, which is like aggressive hardstyle.
Yeah.
And I go up to like terror, you know, and like some crazy 1000 BPM every once in a while. So we do that. So it was this full gamut, but like hanging out at 200 BPM, you know, and that was like sort of the bulk of the record was this like hangout at 200 BPM. And it goes from that like 160 up into the 200 stuff, which is like my bread and butter, and then sort of a little bit up from there. So it's this loose structure. And over the past year and a half of DJing and writing, we just kind of slid some of the tracks off and put them onto the, you know, to the record. And we were fortunate enough to have enough work coming in outside with remixes and collaborations, and that it ended up working out. We were never really pressed for a release or anything. And it all just kind of like made sense. So it was a lot of tracks that I was testing out at festivals and in the live setting, and seeing what was like really working and seeing how hard I could push it, maybe sonically and experimental with the experimental aspect of it, while still retaining this big room festival. Cause I'm an EDM artist, man, you know, like I'm playing EDC. Right. And we want to be on the main stage, you know, like I want to be on the main stage. Like a Tiesto is like plays after me or something crazy like that. Right. You know, that's one of the big goals is to bring the sound to the main stage. And in order to do that, the music has to be main stage music in a sense. So it's finding out how far I can push that. And that was sort of like the essence of the record. And it's also a sort of bookend. I don't want to say of a sound, but over the past couple months, I've come up with some new stuff. I've been secretly hiding kicks and hoarding the good stuff for the next chapter and next wave of what's about to happen. So it's a sort of like summation of the past year and a half. And we're going to enter this new phase with not a new sound, but just, to me, what's an upgraded sound, you know?
Talk to me a little bit, because I think it's kind of interesting that you frame it in this way. Like, you know, you're DJing, you're performing these songs live, and you're kind of learning just by virtue of like playing certain tracks or certain sounds out, like what is working and what's not working, and maybe like what's viable for the record, what's viable for a certain stage and what's not. Like in your experience so far, like, you know, to the audiences that you're playing, some of which are new to you or maybe new to this style of music in some cases, like what are you finding is not working for these audiences that you're like, oh, maybe I need to ease up on that or do something different?
The only times I've ever had some bad experiences is when I've pushed the BPM maybe a little too quick for a crowd that maybe wasn't necessarily there for me. Mm-hmm. One of the worst shows I played was in Tampa with DJ Carnage, and like they were just waiting for Carnage, man. And I hit 200 BPM at like 35 minutes, man, which is pretty quick. And they were like, oh my God. And so that's when I know things might get a little weird, you know, because it is just super fast. And I don't think a lot of people have ever heard this music. They've heard hardstyle. And they've heard like Headhunters, and they've heard this sort of mainstream hardstyle sound, but they haven't heard this aggressive sound. And so that's the only time where I can see stuff get a little crazy, when I'm like pushing it past 200 BPM and hanging out there because people kind of don't know what to do. And I've found myself in a lot of scenarios where they're like dubstep crowds or house crowds, you know, like sort of mainstream EDM, not mainstream, but just sort of a little more accessible levels of EDM crowds. And if you want to look at like the BPM of it all, like they're not playing music past like 150, 160 maybe. And I'm starting at 160. There is not a halftime drop in my set. It is 4 on the floor the whole time. I haven't played a halftime drop in 3 years and I don't plan on it. So like, it just can get a little intense. Now, when I play in Europe, though, I start at 205 just to be sure that it's fast enough for them.
You know, I believe one time, if my memory serves me correctly, I think through you or through someone connected to you, you had shared some video of like a woman who was like really unhappy with your set or something, and she was just screaming like, I forget what she was screaming, like boo or stop, dude, like don't do it anymore.
I was doing a techno set in LA, like, because I've got like a techno project that's coming out next month. And so I always do a little hardcore at the end, you know, I'm like, all right, we got to do 200 BPM. You know? So I play it, and dude, she was like a groundhog or some shit, like a chipmunk. She pops up over the DJ booth, and I'm like, whoa, like what the hell? Literally the last 5 minutes, it was 1:55 in the morning. There's 5 minutes of the entire night left. She goes, it's too fast. What is he doing? She kept saying it's too fast and give me the thumbs down. And it went viral, man. It's still a joke within my brand. You know, people are like, too fast, thumbs down.
Right. Have you sampled that yet?
No. I need to get somebody saying it.
Right. Yeah, you need to get somebody else saying it. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, are those, is that the most extreme reaction, or does that thing happen, you know, sometimes?
Oh yeah. People, you know, I've had other clips of people being like, we don't like this.
Yeah.
You know, just like, this is bad. Or if I remix a popular song, like I remixed that Grizztronic song and did like 600 BPM just to be a troll. And these kids were like, just so upset. And the 1000 BPM song is a G Jones remix. People were like, you can't touch G Jones, Sam. That's so wrong. Like and I'm like, do you guys realize that Greg was the one who gave me the idea? G Jones was the one who told me to do it. Not like, what, you guys? And so anyways, that's about the extent of it. You know?
Got it. So you mentioned a second ago that you have like this techno project that you're working on. Is this something in a different direction that's going to release soon?
Yeah, it's on Mousetrap, which is Dead Mouse's label.
Yeah.
And I sort of kind of pulled away from the hard techno, which was what people expected me to do, the fast sort of techno sound.
Right.
And I like leaned a little bit EDM with like still that, what I was talking about, the mainstream aesthetic, that it's like, I'm going to try to play this stuff at EDC. And like, I don't know if the average EDC crowd is really ready for like 160 BPM, like grinding hard trance technos type music. Maybe they are, I don't know. So I'll do a little bit of it, but it kind of runs from like the 115, I think, up to like 135. And I'm like a big Skinny Puppy fan. I like really love that EBM kind of sound,
Yeah.
front or 242, those kind of groups. So
Yeah.
we leaned a little in that direction with the sort of like after hours, dungeon kind of vibes. So it should be cool. It's a passion project,
Okay. Is it like more of like an EP's length or like a full album?
Yeah, 4 songs.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the record, because I wanted to ask you, or just kind of get on the record for everybody watching, just because there's been curiosity about it, the sample that you did of me. Up until that point, we had a fair amount of interactions just from basically every time I'd mention you on a weekly track roundup, or we'd play you on New Music Fridays. Sometimes you'd pop up in chat and stuff like that. And then I think you messaged me one day through Instagram and you're just like, hey, would it be cool to just like sample you in a track or whatever? It would be this bit of this video. And I said, yeah, sure. It's totally fine. And then I think you may have come back with like a version of it, and cool. And then I think you came back another time. We're like, hey, my label is interested in the song being on the record. Would you be okay with that? And I don't even know if I heard the full version at that point, but I was just like, yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't have to do anything. So, and it sounded fun and I like what you do. So I just said, okay, why the hell not? So, like, tell me what was initially like the point of inspiration, what grabbed you about that clip of snorting every drug up your nose at once that made it into the song, and kind of like what was your, idea placement about it? Because I'll say in terms of like the energy of the track, it does remind me of like an old school song in this style, or even like a Ghetto House track, in terms of like how liberal and just like overbearing you are with the sample. Like when I say that he sampled me on this track, I'm all over this fucking track, like from front to back, again and again and again. And it's just like this in your face sample over and over and over. And I was like, man, he's like really fucking just like laying it on.
Man, I saw the video, I think it was a track review. I don't even remember.
Yeah, it was just some review of some track and I was describing a song or something.
Yeah. And I was like, and it just popped into my head. That's like how it goes, like I just hear something and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And like, Anthony, I don't know. The funny thing was, I'm honest to God, I'm not bullshitting right now, man. Like I had this vision of you in a tracksuit, because you have the bald head and the circle shades.
And
dude.
Sometimes I am in a tracksuit. So
yeah. And I saw you like being a gabber. I was like, oh my God, he's kind of a gabber. Like, look at his tracksuit and his like shaved head and all that. Like, he looks like he's into like old school hardcore. So I was like, it would be great if we did this like kind of old school, like Gabber House sounding track with like a little bit of the modern flair, with the kick production being a little aggressive and like distorted out. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe a fan was like, you should sample that. And I was like, oh my God, I should sample that. And then so I dug around on YouTube for some other videos, because I wanted you to like basically like talk within the track, So it's like my tag goes and you're like, I like that. And then like, I guess I had Cal in there too. Which
you had the So Beautiful sample.
Yeah. Sorry, Cal.
He didn't get the feature credit. He didn't get a feature credit.
I know.
It was just me.
I didn't know.
You didn't have his email. I'm sure if you had his email, you would have asked.
Well, listen, when we get all those syncs and those royalties, we'll cut Cal.
Yeah. We before stream, we were talking about just how many movies and soundtracks and syncs this track is going to get. For sure, it's going to happen.
It's going to be big. So yeah, I just pictured you hawking around, which is like the dance, the hawk. I pictured you in a tracksuit at a rave at 4 a.m, saying it's every drug up my nose at once, and that was how it happened, man. That was how it happened.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for giving me that. It's bragging rights for me personally.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah. Thank you.
Let me dig into something that you kind of alluded to a second ago in terms of like, a more modern hardcore sound. I mean, we did talk about a lot of artists that you're liking right now. If you could make like paint with a broad brush here, like what do you feel like are some of the sounds or ideas that are predominantly defining new hardcore as opposed to old hardcore? Like, is it an increased amount of distortion? Is it an increased amount of noise, or is there something else to it as well that you feel like defines a new school track versus an old school track?
Yes. I think it all really like lies in the kick. And the evolution of the hardcore kick from the 90s is quite interesting in my opinion, because initially, and if you want to get technical with it, it's just a 909. It's the dead kick. It's the like kick from the 909 machine drum or drum machine. And so if you put distortion on a 909 kick drum, and there's other kick drums you can use too, other drum machine samples, but it's the dead, just regular sounding kick. It's not like the 808, it's just the kick. And when you distort one of those, you just put some distortion on it, it will sound like an old school gabber kick. So bam, 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 bam. And that was the original gabber house sound. You know, I'm kind of simplifying everything a little bit.
Yeah.
And so from there, everything started from that 909 kick being distorted, lengthened, more distortion, EQ, filtering, and this process of repeating that through a chain. So you EQ, distort, filter, EQ, distort, whatever, you know, and you do it over and over again. Even sometimes multiple layers of the same thing or layering two separate kicks into itself. It evolved from that like 90s sound into the like millennium sound with like DJ Promo, and then Tommy Knocker and these guys, Art of Fighters, and these guys who sort of, you know, pioneered the millennium sound, because there was a dead period of hardcore from like 2000 to 2006 where like happy hardcore kind of took over and the Gabber House movement sort of fell off a little bit, I want to say. It talks about it in the Thunderdome documentary if anybody is curious and wants to know a little bit more about the history. And then there was a resurge in 2006, and from 2006 up until now, there's been sort of the evolution into the modern sound. And so now the modern sound is still derived from that 909 being distorted, but now there's a variety of like groove within the hardcore kick. And then there's a lot of like separation between the front end of the kick, so the attack, and the back end of the kick, the bass. And how do those two parts relate to each other? In what way are they relating to each other? So with Frenchcore, it's very much an eighth note. So then there's like, you know, up-tempo hardcore that has a swing feel, that has that sort of triplet swing feel. So the bass sort of bounces off the back end of that attack.
That's interesting. How does that swing play out at such high BPMs?
It actually makes it feel a little slower, actually. And I just actually wrote a track that was swung. A lot of hardcore is swung at 200 BPM, like Euro hardcore. So it's kind of cool, and you can go back and forth. But it's really about that relationship. Is it straight? Is it coming like straight off the attack? So bang, 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 bang. Is it like really pulled back? Like boom, got them. Like very little bass, but a lot of attack. And it's the options there are endless. And so what I see in modern hardcore production is producers are really pushing that concept that I just explained right there, the relationship of the attack and what is the attack to the bass and what is the bass. Like, how are we distorting the bass? Is it round? Is it soft? Is it a distorted 808? Like, if you could relate it to like 808s, is it a distorted sounding 808 blown up, or is it a very warm sounding 808 that doesn't have much distortion? And then the attack can have layers. So like I like to put like a racquetball sound kind of on some of my kicks and then pitch that around. So modern hardcore, I think, has pushed the boundaries of what a kick can be. And obviously the production style has leaned, I think, away from that like early rave aesthetic, even though, you know, from time to time you hear old school tracks with like a new school flair, which is like what I like to do a lot of the time. But into like, you know, big synths and, you know, heavy melody and epic anthemic stuff, especially in the mainstream realm.
So, you know, to kind of just like sum it up, you're seeing like more rhythmic variety and different, you know, sort of rhythmic and you know, sort of like rhythm and bass relation approaches in a lot of the new stuff.
Absolutely. And just like different feels of kicks and like, you know, which would, you know, lead to like subgenre delineation, you know?
Sure.
But really, like technically speaking, it's people are really pushing the boundaries on what a kick can be. Gated kicks, there's, you know, kicks that are built off distorting reverb. And which is a very cool concept that was very popular. Laser beam kicks with like a laser sound on the front end. Whereas, you know, in early hardcore, it was pretty much like distorted kick drums, and that's about it.
Right.
You know, the Millennium sound had a little bit of an evolution onto that, I think. But now you're hearing just a wide expanse of like what kicks can be within modern hardcore and hardstyle too.
Well, listen, you've done a killer job of like filling us in and hopefully just making more people excited to dive into this genre. A minute ago, Quirky Music dropped Kick Theory into chat. So you know you came on as a kick theorist in a way. You really kind of like led a bit of a TED talk, a professorial, lecture on kick theory and kick dynamics.
Yes. Direct book.
So listen, thank you for really on the fly being so thorough, being so informative, illuminating. I would say this has been an illuminating conversation, and hopefully making people excited to listen to this new record as well. So again, Faster is out now. You have this techno EP coming out soon via Dead Mouse's record label. What else should people be looking out for from you around the corner, be it sets and performances or other projects or singles and releases and stuff like that?
Anthony, I'm consistent, man. That's what I'm just a consistent.
You're always working. You're always doing something. Every single time I go on Instagram, you're up to no good.
Exactly. Discipline equals freedom. Shout out to that guy who said that.
Yeah, whoever said that.
Jocko, I think is his name. Speaking of Jocko Pastorius was my favorite bass player, and I wanted to.
Yeah, we should listen. Tell me what you got coming around the corner, and then we could talk about some bass.
Okay. We're just going to put out a ton of music, basically. So I got the techno EP, then we're going to do another mix. The seasonal mixes are going to continue to happen. And then, probably a slew of singles. We have some really big remixes in the works that are outside of hardcore, artists a little bit outside of the hardcore realm. In the pop realm. So fingers crossed, we get this one that I am extremely excited about. So stuff like that is something that I'm very keen on doing. I want to work with Dorian again. Dorian Electra is literally one of my favorite people. Right. And just a lot of music. And then we're gearing up for probably another record, beginning of next year, maybe end of this year. I just want to see what I can accomplish if I truly, like, dude, if you sit down and you work for 6 hours every single day, you can get a lot done.
I know that from personal experience. So
I know you do. Yeah. I knew you would resonate with that, Anthony.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to put out a lot of music every 3-4 weeks. We're putting something out. I wrote a cookbook. We're going to release the cookbook. It's a dieting cookbook. You'll get shredded and jacked and eat pancakes while getting shredded and jacked. Who doesn't want that?
That sounds good to me.
It's pretty sick. I had a plate of French toast today, and I lost 2 pounds, this week. So
epic. I made myself tomato soup from scratch, and I ate a bunch of that.
That sounds better, to be honest. I'm so hungry all the time right now. It's horrible. But we got to get shredded for EDC. So we got EDC coming up. A lot of festivals in Europe. I'm going to be in Spain, France, Austria, Holland. We're all over the world, Australia. So just a lot of domestic stuff too. Trying to bring this sound to every city in the country.
Hype.
Yes.
All right, you want to talk a little bass before we head out? When did you start playing bass?
Man. You're good, dude.
Thank you.
When I was 15, man, I got into bass.
That's about when I started playing too, yeah.
Really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, like 14, 15.
I got into upright bass around like 16, and I went to Berklee College of Music. And so I was a jazz guy for like a really long time, and that's like what I did for super long. So I still love bass, man. It's
nice. Do you still play it today, or you haven't picked it up in a while?
I'm pretty rusty. Like I was playing an electric bass and I was not very good. My friend was like, "What the hell happened? Didn't you go to college for this?" But I'm still pretty good at upright bass. I can still like walk bass lines. I could probably read a real book chart of something like easy, like maybe like some like a blues or like maybe a Charlie Parker tune or something like just kind of simple. So yeah, that's what
I pray that I'm fortunate I get to practice a little bit every day and I'm still on the electric 4-string. Do you have like a particular sound or tone or preference with like an electric bass or anything like that? I mean, I like just a Fender myself.
Yeah, I had a Fender Jazz bass. That was my get down. I really liked those. I also like kind of dug the Ernie Balls. The Music Mans were pretty good.
Yeah.
For some more of the slap stuff. But dude, you're good. Like I saw a video and I was like, yo, Anthony can thump. Like what?
Was that the Mark Rebier video where you were playing together, or like some other video?
I think so.
Yeah.
You were playing some funky stuff, man, and it was good. Do you have a P bass? It's a P bass, right?
I have a P bass and a jazz bass. I have both.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, depending on what vibe I'm feeling.
Yeah. Do you put the foam in the P bass?
Hell yes. Well, I mean, my P bass that I prefer to play, I have the foam and it's fretless and I have flats on it. So it's just literally the most upright sound that you could probably get out of a P bass.
That's sick, man. That is so sick. I never did the fretless electric bass, even though I was like a huge Jocko fan, man.
Depending on what kind of like strings that you use, it's almost like, to me, like the point of a fretless is to like get closer to that upright sound. You know what I mean? Even though I do like that Jocko tone. But if you play a fretted with finesse, like you can get pretty close, especially if you're, kind of like rolling back the tone knobs a little bit. But like with the P bass fretless, get the flats on there. Like again, especially if you're on like a warm tube amp, you get like so close to that upright sound, especially if you're like playing away from the pickups and you're playing further up the neck, like you're right on fucking key with it.
Yeah. You know who's my teacher in college? My first year, it was the hardest class like of any class that I've ever had in regular school and music school, was Esperanza Spalding. She taught me reading too. Yeah. Wow. And it was unbelievably impossible. She was like, what? Like, this isn't that hard. And I was like, this is literally going from 12/8 to 7/4 within like a 3-bar period. Like, what are you talking about? This isn't hard. This is like extremely hard. And she's like, whatever, dude. Just like crushing.
Man, she just like drill sergeanted you. It was
just like so bad.
Just ground you into the dirt like a worm.
It was like a class of all dudes too. So like she was just crushing us, and we were just, our egos were just annihilated. We just felt so small and just. It was cool though. That was the last year she taught at Berkeley, actually.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's an incredible opportunity and experience. I mean, personally, like I practice a lot and I try to just emulate things that I hear. I probably could not hack it in a music class. Like so, I mean, the fact that you were even there and got ground into dust is like, a testament to you for sure.
Yeah. Who'd you like when you were like kind of learning growing up? Like who were your like you big guys?
Like when I was starting to play bass, I was really into some of the bass lines that I would hear on like pop radio and rock radio, like Rage Against the Machine and Cake and stuff like that. And I would like play a lot of that stuff. And when I first started taking lessons, my teacher who I had for like 4 years or so, he was very into Sting and the Police. So I was like learning all those Sting bass lines, so, and those were fine and those were fun, learning Roxanne and, and stuff like that. Eventually I got to a point where I got really into punk music. But was also like drawn to certain bands and artists that had standout bass lines, like Dead Kennedys, for example. Klaus's performances are very jazz influenced sometimes. And there are some tracks like Riot where it's like the whole bass performance is nothing but like chords. And he's just like aggressively strumming chords from like front to back on the whole thing. From there, I think I got really obsessed with Primus, as every bass player does at some point in it's a rite of passage. Like there's a point where, you're teaching yourself too many puppies from front to back. And then you're trying to do, Jerry was a race car driver and, you're just, you're just going through that for a minute. And then I think I got like kind of sick of, I kind of slapped myself to death and I got sick of hearing it and I got sick of doing it. And, I think like the last thing that really was like sort of eluding me was just like walking bass lines in general. And just because I had one credit left over in my college class, I just took like a 100 level jazz band course. And the professor, I was already familiar with him because one day I had approached him, and just out of curiosity, and I said, like, I was trying to get into jazz music in general, and I was like, hey, are there any, jazz albums or artists that you'd recommend? And he says, yeah, actually, I like to spend a lot of the music department budget on jazz CDs for the library, and you can go to the music section in the library and you could take out all the jazz CDs that I bought for the music section. And I said, great. So I was taking out dozens of, like, Miles and Roland Kirk and Coltrane CDs and everything, and I was in Mingus CDs, and I was just burning all of them. I wouldn't even listen to them before I burned them. I was just like grabbing whatever, just every Impulse like record that I saw in there, and just like burning it instantly and putting it on giant like compilation data disc, and I just like listened to hours of this stuff on my commute to school. And then after kind of making that connection, I decided to take this class because I knew he would be teaching it, and he's a bassist himself. And I tried, but he was probably to a lesser degree than the Esperanza Spalding thing, but it's like the moment I tried to do one walking bass line in front of him, he just like kind of just like that's nice, and he just patted me on the head and he's like, but do it like this instead. And like it took a while, but eventually kind of got a little bit of a working idea. And then I've just been kind of like trying to practice and work that more into my playing again and again. But that's kind of the certain eras and sounds that I was obsessed with over a certain period of time in my playing.
You're a bass player, man. You're a bass player.
Hell yeah.
You're a bass player. Charles Mingus, man. Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. One of the best songs ever. I saw in 8th grade, I saw Primus play The Seas of Cheese in its entirety.
Wow.
It was so sick. So sick. And this is one of those pivotal concerts for me. So I'm a big Les guy too.
Yeah. Cool. That's cool. All right. Well, I'm glad we bonded over so much here.
Me too.
Thank you for coming through. This has been great. Have a good one. And we'll look forward to everything that you got coming down the pipe.
Sweet, man.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. Later, y'all.